Hello. I recently took part in Kilohearts' contest for the 7th anniversary of Faceplant. Somewhat to my surprise, they've picked me as one of the winners, so I thought I'd go through the patch I made. The rules of the contest were that all of the sounds had to come from a single Faceplant patch. In my case, all you need to do is input a C#4 and hold it down and you'll hear the sound as intended. So hopefully that might sound quite familiar to you. All of those sounds are from the same patch, so there's quite a lot going on. And I've reached the maximum number of generators you can have. To keep it organised, I sorted most things into groups. Here are the tom sounds you hear in the intro. Then we've got a kick drum, a snare, hi-hats, a melody, and the bass line. And down here in the modulator section, we've also got things in groups. I'm not relying on any envelopes within the generator section because I need to re-trigger them, which I can do from the modulator section instead. The sound of the toms is mostly made just with this noise. I'm using a curve to give it a sharp attack, and I'm also using the same curve to make it increase in brightness at the start, which I've achieved by assigning it to the slope. There's also this analog oscillator. This is basically a quite low frequency sine wave, and its phase is being modulated by the noise oscillator. So it's a bit more obvious if I make it louder. It just sort of adds a bit of a grittier texture to it. Even though these oscillators are both set to have their level at 0, that doesn't mean they'll be silent, because this curve is assigned to increase their level. Then I've got some more filtering going on and a bit of distortion. These are also assigned to this envelope I'm using for the volume. There's also this longer curve, which is used to modulate this bandpass filter and also resonator effects. I'm using this more complicated curve on the left to re-trigger the main curve with the rhythm we want. I've done that by just assigning its output to the trigger input of the main curve. And then we've got an LFO assigned to modulate their pan a bit. And then it's worth noting that most sounds aren't being routed to lane 1, but the toms are. So these effects in lane 1 are mostly just for the toms, including an ensemble, a resonator, and a dual delay. If I re-enable the kicks modulators, we still won't hear anything from it. But you can see it keeps looping as I'm holding it. I've set this one to sustain mode, which is why it plays permanently. The reason it's silent is because I've set the curve to have no depth by default. I'm using this curve on the left to unmute the kick once the drum fill's done, which I did by assigning it to the depth of the curve. For the sound of the kick, it's pretty much just a sine wave being sharply modulated up and then back down, and it's sent through a bit of distortion. I've made 2 envelopes for the snare. The one on the right is its main volume envelope, and this one on the left is just used to trigger the other envelope at the correct time. So as before, we've got this one on sustain mode, and just like with the kick, we've got this other curve to modulate when it's muted or unmuted. For the sound itself, it's largely just noise, with a bit of distortion and a bit of filtering. Again, we've got a similar setup for the hi-hat. This curve on the left is being used to trigger this curve on the right, which is its main volume envelope. I've done something slightly different for this one, which is that this curve on the left, I'm not always setting it straight to full volume. I'm using that to give it a subtle pumping effect. This random modulator here is just modulating its pan a bit. For the sound of the hi-hat, we've got some noise being filtered through a high-pass filter. And then I've got a non-linear filter set to all-pass mode and quite high Q and drive. Here's how that sounds without that filter. And with. The hi-hats are routed to lane 1, so we are hearing them with the effects that the toms had at the start. For the melody line, we've got a sawtooth oscillator with the unison enabled, and also a quite buzzy sounding wavetable oscillator. And that's going through a low-pass filter, which is being modulated by its volume envelope. And as before, we've got this other curve, which is used to control its rhythm. And for this curve on the left, I've assigned it to its pitch. So effectively what I've done here is I've just drawn in the melody line. And again, we've got a similar setup for the bass. Its sound is made with a wavetable oscillator and a lot of filter modulation. And then the last thing is this curve here, which is doing two things. The main thing it's doing is triggering the tape stop at the end of the song. It also brings in a little bit of reverb at the end. So that's the full patch. I suggest you check out some of the other entries, because there's a lot of interesting sound design stuff there. And thanks to Kilohearts for hosting the contest, and for letting me get away with not taking it so seriously. Thanks for watching.